Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. I'm Kevin Hoare, and it is the 10th of June. And tonight, I'm flying solo. Just returned from some more travel and want to keep you guys up to date on what's happening out there and give you the opinion and insights that you really can't get anywhere else. Let's start off at the top of the news here. So, one big piece of news, obviously, is the revelations that Nancy Pelosi, and this, mind you, Nancy Pelosi is not the Speaker of the House, but in January of 2021, she was. And she was the primary person in charge of ultimately instructing the Capitol Police what they could and could not do and should not do. This has come out after, let's see, this is 2024. So that is just around 3.5 years ago. And we've just learned, even though there's been people serving time in jail since then, that Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who is a documentary filmmaker, recorded video of her mother, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker at that time, saying, I take responsibility for the January 6th security failures. It really undermines a narrative that we've been hearing ever since January 6th from Democrats, who also formed a committee that did everything it could to, in a very biased fashion, create a narrative that the sole responsibility for what took place on January 6th lay with President Trump and his supporters that were present that day. And now House Republicans are calling this out. There are already issues with the way that January 6th committee was composed. When the Democrats are in charge, 2021 and 2022. But it says here, moments after being whisked away from the U.S. Capitol after it was breached on January 6, 2021, then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was captured on videotape saying, I take responsibility for failing to have a better security plan for that fateful day, something she has never said or admitted anytime since then. And we have responsibility, Terry, Pelosi is heard saying on videotape to her chief of staff, Terry McCullough. We do not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. Pelosi also said, you're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff, should we call the Capitol Police? I mean, the National Guard. Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with? McCullough replied, as the speaker's SUV raced through the underground parking garage, so she was well taken care of at that point, that they thought they had sufficient resources. Has that guy, McCullough, ever been called to testify by the January 6th committee or anyone else? Pelosi responded, clearly frustrated, no, that's not a question of how they don't know. They clearly didn't know. And I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more. Taking responsibility 3.5 years after lying, deceiving the public. And you can watch the video footage. It's readily available here on Twitter. So I'm going to post the article, which, many people said that this wasn't sort of cooked up or portrayed as a setup. We said it was, many of us here in Oregon said that it looked like a setup. And for all intents and purposes, it was, because Capitol Police were encountered with a situation and they were given specific instructions by someone. The persons who gave those instructions received their instructions from someone, and all of that traces back to Nancy Pelosi and her staff, period. So the chief of the Capitol Police, the sergeant at arms for the House at that time, they all reported to Nancy Pelosi. Now, The footage was recorded by Pelosi's daughter, Alexandra, and who helped HBO shoot a documentary about the January 6th riot. But the video was not aired in its entirety until Monday, today, when Republicans on the House Administration Oversight Subcommittee released it after obtaining it from the TV network. They had to obtain it from the TV network. Now, remember, there was a committee that was supposed to go and investigate all this stuff. Now, Schumer, I don't know about Schiff, but Bobby, I see you mentioning Schumer. Schumer was in the minority at that time. So Mitch McConnell, which I have no idea what Mitch McConnell knew or when he knew it, but in January of 2021, Mitch McConnell was still the majority leader of the U.S. Senate, and so there was no at that moment in time when that was occurring. I guess he had the primary say from the Senate side. However, ultimately, I believe the Capitol is presided over by the Speaker, and she's admitting that they weren't ready. And then asking why something that actually was requested and offered by President Trump, and we know that because it's been documented and testified to. I'm trying to remember the name of the person who was the assistant to the Secretary of Defense at the time who testified to this, but he explained that here's the piece of paper, here's the evidence. Here, this actually happened. President Trump offered the National Guard. There were warnings clearly given to congressional leadership and to the Capitol Hill Police that there was a potential for something like what occurred to happen. And their reaction was that, as I recall during the test, they were worried about optics. Now, who ultimately made that decision and who did or did not consult Nancy Pelosi, I don't know. But I know that we have got some serious testimony that needs to be taken by the current Congress. And this needs to be made public, because we know that the rest of this year, we're going to hear almost nonstop from Democrats about January 6th, because they're so underwater in every single other issue you can imagine. Every other issue is a disaster for them right now. They pretty much are going to run on two things, and it's going to work in some races and not others. But January 6th, of course, they're going to talk about President Trump when it comes to congressional races, and they're going to talk about abortion. That's it. And you're right. What happens to the ones serving time for nothing? I don't know. I know that there's a Supreme Court case that also could address the charges and the sentences handed down that may actually have some effect upon what's happened to the people that have been sentenced and are serving. And there are definitely some people who got into some sort of fisticuffs with Capitol Police. There are definitely some people that did damage to the Capitol building, but there's also people that were just looking for a toilet and got let into the Capitol building by the Capitol Police, including one of the most famous people they put on trial and actually sentenced to, I think, 48 months in jail, which is the guy wearing that Wookiee outfit that they escorted into the Senate chamber and let him walk around. We'll touch upon some international news tonight, Nicholas. We will. So anyway, this is big news because it undercuts a campaign narrative that the Democrats used in 2022 to minimize their potential losses and will use again in many races this year. And now the truth must come out. 3.5 years is long enough. And I think HBO has some accountability here, because it doesn't sound like it was included in any documentary that's been as yet aired. Who knows if that documentary will air with anything like this and tell the real story. But also, they covered it up. HBO had this stuff and knew it. And frankly, it sounds like they were compelled in some way by the House of Representatives to turn it over, the House Administration Oversight Committee that had obtained it. So this is just the beginning of full disclosure on this. And that's what we should have, 100% full disclosure and transparency. If someone wants to go and try to use this issue in a campaign for winning political office or unseating someone, then they should contend with the truth. And the answer from Pelosi is a disingenuous one. They say numerous independent fact checkers have confirmed that Speaker Pelosi did not plan her own assassination. Cherry picked out of context clips that don't change that. 3 years later, House Republicans are still trying to whitewash January 6th as shameful, unpatriotic, and pathetic. Well, it doesn't wipe away anything that Nancy Pelosi just said. It's not a whitewash. It's a truth wash. Wash away the lies. And there, I just invented a new word. Feel free, everybody, to use it. Truth wash. And but the fact that there was a committee established whose specific job it was to get to the truth, instead perpetrated and actually did a Hollywood-style theater production to convince people of a narrative that turns out it doesn't actually match reality. Much of the TV footage, the internal TV footage from the Capitol that was released last year already undermined that narrative. And now her own admission directly contradicts that narrative. And the fact that they tried to turn the situation into propaganda, someone's lied. I don't know if anyone can actually go to jail for that. But bring out the truth wash. Wash it off. That's what I say. And so did I post the link? Yes, you can just follow the video yourself. And by the way, there is an interview, it looks like, with Representative Loudermilk, who's the representative Barry Loudermilk, who put out the video and got it released. And he was asked by Laura Logan, who's somebody who's actually been pushing for the truth on this since the beginning, even to the point that she got kicked off Fox News for pressing this issue too hard, among others, and some of the Fauci stuff, which, by the way, she's been totally vindicated about that. That guy probably should end up facing some sort of charges, and maybe he will, for what he perpetrated, the fraud he perpetrated on the American people, phony medical advice that they've now admitted he didn't have any scientific evidence behind many of the things he decided, as well as some culpability for trying to hide the fact that money was sent that funded the research that could have led to this lab leak that is now believed to be the cause of COVID. Geez, how many trillions have to be wasted and how many people have to die before that guy faces accountability? Anyway, Laura Logan asks Representative Loudermilk, is January 6th potentially the biggest setup in the history of this country? Loudermilk said, potentially. Logan, one of the greatest crimes against the American people. And then this is a video of her interviewing him. And so it's time. It's time to get to the truth of this. And I hope we do that. So here's another story that kind of captures Representative Loudermilk and several other representatives reacting to this. Ohio Representative Warren Davidson said, what we didn't do is find out the truth about what actually happened on January 6th. What Nancy Pelosi created was a sham partisan committee that was designed to cover up the failures of what happened on the Capitol grounds. It was a cover-up committee sanctioned by the person who admitted responsibility in this video. How was it that protesters were even able to breach security of the Capitol and go through the Capitol? There was no point that any level of violence should be able to overcome the nation's Capitol. And Nancy Pelosi clearly in that video acknowledges that she failed as a leader, which is an important admission. They didn't do anything to expose that. In fact, they destroyed evidence and have been working to cover it up. That's where you might find some criminal charges, because several of the members of that committee did, in fact, destroy evidence, as reportedly. And you don't get to do that. As a member of Congress, you don't have the right to just go and incinerate evidence. So it's time. Let your friends know, and let's make sure we get the word out there as soon as possible. And yeah, I mean, somebody has to explain who told or provided the since exonerated Capitol Hill police officer who shot, I forget her name, but she's the former Air Force, the Air Force veteran who was killed on January 6th. The only person actually killed on January 6th was her. And she was unarmed, and she was shot through a window in the head and killed. And so point blank. And that is something right there. Somebody made that decision, and somebody bears responsibility. And someone actually at the top of the accountability chain has to explain why they tried to cover it up and why they allowed someone to come out there and portray people who didn't die on January 6th as if they did. Really, it's a giant lie. Maybe they just need to be brought in front of the Congress now and forced to testify. And if they take the Fifth Amendment, well, then you know. Then you kind of know something, right? All right. Well, moving on. Yeah, we did have some interesting international news. This last weekend, of course, we had the commemoration of D-Day and the pathetic situation where Joe Biden tried to use D-Day in order to help his campaign, the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And it's really amazing because there were 100-year-old people, 100-year-old veterans present on D-Day who did actually really difficult stuff. You're right, Nicholas. It doesn't mean that they're guilty. It means that they do not want to testify against themselves for fear that it actually could be used against them. And actually, they don't get to just claim the Fifth no matter what. There actually has to be a credible expectation of that, especially since they may be asked only to testify narrowly to confirm information they already provided. So, yeah. Yeah, Biden bombed in Normandy. That's a great headline there. I love it. Yeah, there were 100-year-old guys that were in much better shape than Biden, made it through the entire ceremony. And actually, Biden left at the very moment when the leaders were going and shaking the hands of these veterans. Joe Biden had to hustle him out of there because Joe Biden, frankly, can't handle it anymore. And it's totally obvious. I mean, the only thing worse than what Joe Biden's doing is the fact that there's actually whole chunks of the media that cover this up, that say he's spry and he's totally on top of everything, and you know, that he is sharp as a tack. There's a really good Republican National Committee, RNC, PR piece that came out that exposes this, because Biden actually has defenders in Congress that are saying all this stuff. Well, those people have said it publicly, and I believe that they actually are going to face real consequences for that too, eventually. I mean, I hope so. They deserve to. And if Joe Biden, yeah, here it is. I found it. It's House Dems say what? House Dems say what? And of course, this is on the heels of a Wall Street Journal report that goes into quite some detail about what's happening behind the scenes and what 45 different people were interviewed and testified to the Wall Street Journal is happening, which is that Joe Biden sits there in meetings. He is inaudible at times. He mumbles. He loses track of what he's saying. He's in negotiations and he starts repeating things he already said that are no longer pertinent. But this Wall Street Journal report, let me see. I'll post that. I don't know if all of you have the ability to read Wall Street Journal. Let me see if I can. Is there a way? Copy free link. Let me see here. Okay, so I'm going to post this, and you should be able to read the Wall Street Journal article that really recounts what's happening behind the scenes, the stuff that they claim is all super duper and awesome. Because all what we see in front of the camera, they're saying, well, the Joe Biden I know is doing just fine, and he's a really good negotiator. And frankly, there was a time when he used to be, but we know that he constantly makes false claims in public. All the things they described are stuff that we've all seen him do in public. And there really isn't a difference between the public and the private Joe Biden. And even though President Trump is only 3.5 years younger than Biden, Biden looks like he's 10 years, maybe 15 years older. And that's why he had to flee the D-Day ceremony. But here's some of the statements made by Democrat members of Congress. Mary Petola, who is an Alaska member of Congress. By the way, she was elected in the last election using ranked choice voting. And ranked choice voting allowed an estate that voted almost 70% for Donald Trump for a Democrat to get elected statewide over Sarah Palin because of the way they configured this voting system of ranked choice voting. Mary Petola. Biden's mental acuity is very, very on. He's one of the smartest, sharpest people I've met in D.C. Well, then maybe Mary Petola is not sharp enough to serve in Congress. And maybe she's not going to, because I understand that they're going to repeal that ranked choice voting. I don't know if they'll do it in time to send her packing, but we'll see. Hillary Scholten, Michigan District 3. All right. The oldest president ever elected. All right. Well, people tend not to believe that what they've never seen. Just denying what was said. Vincent Gonzalez, Texas District 34. Biden, he's healthy. He's sharp. He's a full package. Yeah. That's stretching the word full beyond its reasonable dictionary definition. I don't think Biden's had his brain removed. I just think this is what your brain looks like when it's on Biden. Not your brain, but a brain. And Mary Gluskamp Perez, Washington 3. So that's right up in Vancouver, right? The fastest growing city in Oregon, Vancouver, Washington. By the way, I looked that up. That is a Republican +5 district. And she eked out a win over a guy named Joe Kent, who's running again against her, as I understand it. She said, that lack of diversity is what I think is at the heart of a lot of his frustration. So this is just Joe Biden frustrated with a lack of diversity. Interesting. Sorry, Marie, not so sharp of you. Maybe do that in a district less favorable to Republicans. Susan Wild, Pennsylvania District 7. He's sharp, no memory issues, and his only stumbling is when he trips over words. Really? Then why did they put the giant shoes on him? They literally put huge orthopedic shoes on him to make it so that there's less of a chance that he would stumble when he goes someplace. Guess he needs those shoes to step over all the words that turn out to be lies that he utters day in and day out. Stephen Horsford, Nevada, number 4. The president is very well suited to be our commander-in-chief. Oh, okay. Stephen, you're going to go down in history as having said that. And I really hope that one day when you're explaining to people what the truth is, that you can actually explain why what you just said was even close to what you or anybody could actually believe, unless you're just a complete moron. Nevada 4. By the way, Nevada, I don't know the latest polling, but a couple weeks ago, President Trump was up by 13 percentage points in Nevada. So, Stephen, maybe your state's not going to be the state you thought it was either. And maybe Nevada does not agree that he's very well suited, President Biden, to be our commander in chief. Ro Khanna, California District 17. I think he's actually really good. I think his staff overprotects him. I think put him out there in a press conference. Who cares if someone makes a gaffe? I agree. That's the first thing I've heard. I agree, Ro. Send Joe Biden out there. Let him loose. Let Biden be Biden. Everybody needs to see the real Joe Biden, unscripted, unprotected, no people in bunny suits coming out to make sure he doesn't walk in the wrong direction. And look, if he can't figure out how to get back into the White House, he should just keep walking around the White House until he figures it out. He's got the giant shoes. How's he going to hurt himself now? Really? He's got like this small army of Secret Service agents ready to protect him. So why doesn't he just, let's see what happens? Seems fair. So thanks, Ro, for that suggestion. Dan Goldman. Now that guy, in my opinion, total snake. He's the liar that they send out who supposedly used to be a prosecutor who constantly explains why everything that's being said about Joe Biden in these investigations of the Hunter Biden, the Chinese bribery, the Ukrainian bribery, all this stuff that's gone on is just not true. There's no facts. And it's like there's this huge list of facts. And then they bring out Dan Goldman to say, nothing to see here. He reminds me of that character that on Saturday Night Live. He was a lawyer, and I'm trying to remember. Martin Short, I think, played him, and he would just have this cigarette that was burning, and like half the cigarette was just ash, and he'd be sitting there. He'd be asked questions, and this lawyer's job was just to lie, right? The character, and he goes like, I didn't say anything. You said that. I didn't say that. You said that. No, there's no truth to that. I didn't say that. And then they take something he just said. I didn't say that. You said that. You're saying that now. I didn't say that. And so that's Dan Goldman. So Dan Goldman said, Biden is actually, quote, sharper than anyone I've spoken to, unquote. Well, that tells you something. That tells you more about Dan Goldman than it tells you about Joe Biden, for sure. Sydney Camlager Dove, California District 37. Quote, everybody knows the president's age, but when I've talked to him, he's incredibly lucid. Well, I don't know. If you pump him with enough drugs, you can be lucid for several minutes around other people. I agree with President Trump. This debate that's coming up, I think, is June 27th. What they should do is Joe Biden should do a drug test and a full medical reveal. We need to know just how modified by, say, I don't know, methamphetamines or whatever he's taking. I don't know. He is, so that when he goes in there, we know, are we getting Joe Biden or Joe Biden on drugs? The Joe Biden without drugs is pretty bad. So the Joe Biden on drugs, the old yeller that likes to scream and yell, the one that apparently thinks that his son who passed away from cancer died in Iraq and keeps telling Gold Star families that at events. Which guy are we going to get? And then what is he being modified by? Donald Trump said he'll take a drug test, and you can count on the fact that Donald Trump is drug free. Just he doesn't even drink. So, anyway, the NRCC National Press Secretary Will Reinert said about all these comments from Democrat members of the House of Representatives, the Wall Street Journal report raises doubts that Joe Biden can even still count to 4, but extreme House Democrats want 4 more years. So, well said, eh? Did I post the link to this? Let me do that. This is a really good thing that was put out by this is the NRCC. Sorry, it's not the RNC, but it's one of their research products that helps you know what's really been said. Anyway, so let's shift back to some other news, but let's head into Oregon here because uh, Oregon's also doing nutty stuff, and we got to keep an eye on this state because. So here's the latest. A new judicial order on holding drug dealers not likely to crowd jails. This is actually it's the Oregon Capitol Chronicle, but it's been reprinted by the Portland Tribune. Hopefully you can get right into that article and see it. But the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court has issued an order. I guess it's guidance to courts and prosecutors, etc., that calls for keeping people suspected of the most serious drug crimes in jail for at least a few days longer. The article says it's not expected to squeeze county jail capacity, at least not in Multnomah County, which is where a lot of the drug dealers are hanging out. So they're probably going to continue to hang out there. Chief Justice Megan Flynn issued an order this week, the week of May 27th, that requires holding people suspected of the worst drug crimes in jail while awaiting arraignment, which means they've been arrested, but they haven't been brought into court to be arraigned and have the charges explained to them in full. Previously, people arrested for illegal drug dealing and illicit drug manufacturing or drug crime involving a minor could have been released. So that's how bad it was before this order, and probably still is just that bad. This new designation puts them in the same category as others who have been held pending arraignment before a judge, including those suspected of violent felonies, residential burglary, domestic crimes, and possession of a firearm. The idea is to keep them out of the community while awaiting a judicial decision on whether they can be released on bail. So these guys could still get bail. Many of them just go back out and deal more drugs because they know they probably won't be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And while the Schmidt show is still happening in Multnomah County, because Mike Schmidt is still going to be the district attorney through the end of the calendar year before Nathan Vasquez takes over, you can expect more of this to be going on. I'm pretty sure Mike Schmidt, when he lost his reelection on May 21st, lost all incentive to continue pretending temporarily that he was going to enforce any laws. Now, House Bill 4002 is apparently the reason cited by the Chief Justice, which recriminalized drug possession and tightened the law on drug dealing to include possession with the intent of selling and dealing near a park, treatment facility, or residential facility, which actually that's exactly what you get right outside the treatment and residential facilities. It's like a little little community of drug dealers that locates right outside of, which is so good for people trying to get off drugs, by the way. They say that this order allows more people charged with drug crimes that pose the greatest risk to public health and safety to be held until a judge determines whether they can be released with conditions to ensure public safety in future court appearances. That means we're going to have to look at some of these judges because it does give them the discretion to not do that. And we know we have some judges that, frankly, have been appointed or got in there into certain jurisdictions where the law isn't exactly something they're tough on. So they're actually tougher on the communities that there's really should be responsible for protecting. But so there, now you know what's happening here in Oregon is more crazy stuff. I found this article, this headline, interesting. It's in the Natural Resources Report.com. I'm posting it here. Environmental Justice Council listening sessions. Oregon's Environmental Justice Council will begin holding listening sessions around the state to hear about environmental justice concerns directly from impacted communities. This work is outlined in House Bill 4077, passed in 2022, which formalized the existence of this council. The bill directs the council to conduct an inclusive community engagement process to identify EJ, environmental justice priorities, as part of a process to develop a statewide EJ mapping tool. OFS, which is what is that? Or, Oregonians for Food and Shelter was engaged as this bill was being drafted and amended, along with many of our natural resource partners. We stress the importance of rural and frontier communities being recognized as vulnerable EJ communities. So the head of the council was appointed by Governor Kate Brown, and so August 6th in Gold Beach, from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Curry County Public Library is, I guess, the first of these listening sessions. Now, they say rural communities are going to be allowed to talk about wildfire risk and smoke impacts, and economic pressures that changing environmental regulations put on these communities. I just wonder, because when you title something environmental justice, it sounds like you only want to hear certain kind of feedback. And then the stuff that says, you know what, this environmental justice stuff is kind of BS, and here's the real problem. I think it's almost like it is rigged, right? So it's not really an authentic feedback session, because they've already coined the term environmental justice as something that should be equally important to everyone, when in fact, if the economics of your community, the overregulation by the state government, the wildfire and smoke impacts that you're experiencing, which you attribute to the failure to actively manage our forests, the failure of the Federal Bureau of Land Management and associated entities to put out fires that take place on federal lands and then go over and engulf private lands and state properties. And let's not forget, it's like some 60% of the state is federal land. I think I heard recently House District 4 is like 70 or 80%. Are they going to be allowed to say what they want about that? And will that affect any policies? I don't think so. I think this is kind of like saying we're going to have a racial justice council and we're going to accept racial justice feedback. And if you come in and say, you know what, I think the problem here is that in Curry County, racial justice isn't the problem. It's letting drug dealers go and people bringing fentanyl across the southern border. I'm pretty sure they're going to shut you down, right? So I wanted everyone to know this is going on, because maybe you show up anyway and you let them have it, and then see what happens. And when they try to shut you up, you say, well, this isn't feedback. This is just another one of these propaganda efforts to take selective input and vindicate existing policies that are laying waste to our state, right? Unions apparently have been caught lying to the public again. Some of you might have heard about this last week. The teachers union in Portland, there were some extremely controversial school ads that were promoting teachers to teach anti-Israel propaganda. So something that schools aren't for is to be engaged in any kind of political propaganda. But one thing's for sure, they're not there to proselytize and force people to do things like engage in Islamic worship. They're not there to whitewash Hamas and convince kids that they should adopt the position of adults who are protesting in favor of Hamas. That is just not actually what the schools are for. And so they had an exercise, a handbook exercise that asked students to write their protest against Israel by saying "Free Palestine." And I will chant this at a Palestine protest as a commitment that they asked for kids to make on this form. The handbook shows people waving signs saying abolish prisons, everybody's free. See, those are policies that have worked so well. for Oregon. See, that's like free Hamas from Gaza is roughly the same as saying let's free murderers from jails. What's the difference? And from the river to the sea, one activity says you can raise your hands to the sky and pray for the people of Palestine. Don't pray for anyone in Israel that was raped, murdered, brutalized, babies that were burned and beheaded intentionally. I think that's actually the most important thing here. So anyway, the Portland Teachers Union has removed this anti-Semitic handbook. This was reported by KGW TV. Alongside some of the teaching material, a Portland Public Schools Jewish teacher told KGW that the union handed out pro-Palestinian material at a meeting of the union on May 28th. And referred to the Israeli government as apartheid rule, and other pamphlets referred to Hamas as a Palestinian resistance force, leaving out the whole mass murder stuff. And so this has been widely reported. The unions actually were chastised by the Oregonian editorial board. That's right, the Oregonian editorial board chastised the unions for lying about this at first, trying to cover it up. And this is the same union that used dishonest budget numbers in a teacher walkout strike not too long ago. So this is the same union, by the way, that was criticized for making lost school days with fake Christmas school days, where wink, wink, students were not required to attend. And nearly a quarter of students didn't, but the school counted those days anyways as days students attended. The union, by the way, faces a $100 million lawsuit from parents in the whole botched strike. That could not happen to a more deserving entity. So there's some crazy Oregon news, and I had to put it in front of you because someone's got to know this stuff. This is the stuff that, when exposed, sunlight serves as the greatest and most powerful disinfectant. And here's the Oregonian article, by the way, the editorial chastising them. And, I think I've covered a lot of topics tonight. I kind of skipped around because I actually spent not a whole lot of time preparing. I'm just winging it. And I hope this is an informative and interesting show for you guys. And it's true, Marjorie, that except for Portland, most parents are conservative as far as their kids' education goes. So school choice will really damage public schools because public schools have tried to make sure that no one has any choice once they're in the system, and their unions are using that leverage to produce that. So will it actually? It deservingly will impact public schools. The only thing I can think of is if there are people who want the schools to change, that might be the only way, is for people to have the option to take the government funding that's been dedicated to that school for their child and take it elsewhere. I think that's actually one thing that will allow people to start exercising their freedom and clean up those schools rather quickly. So here's two last stories I'm going to hit. One is related to what we just heard of. The Rose Parade was called genocide this past weekend. 8 were arrested. KPTV reports that 8 people were arrested for disrupting the annual Portland Grand Floral Festival Parade. And immediately afterwards, some local anarchist groups, Antifa, called for the release and deemed the Portland Rose Festival Parade a genocide parade. Is it because they killed a lot of flowers? I suppose it's a mass flower murder parade. Alrighty. I hear you can grow those things again, by the way. The Antifa might want to look into that. The Portland police release details said the protesters harassed police and parade watchers for over an hour before they were arrested. So they did this for an hour. Nobody did anything. And then finally they got arrested. Officers are made aware of a protest by a few dozen people on the sidewalk northeast Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard near Northeast Pacific Avenue. There was information the group may be motivated to block the parade. The Portland Police Bureau event liaison officers, that's a long title, approached the members of the group, offered to be a point of contact with the PPB and parade organizers, and let them know that they were welcome to be there and engage in free speech. Okay. However, they were warned not to disrupt the parade. The group members agreed. However, shortly thereafter, some of the group began to encroach upon the honor line into the street, potentially blocking some of the marching bands and large floats. Not so good for their word. Bike squad officers responded and made a line asking the group to back up behind the line. They initially complied, but then began to get verbally hostile. After about an hour, a relief squad was called in. The relief squad, an hour, was an ad hoc group of officers and other PPB members who had to be pulled off barricades and other duties to assist with the protest. One person later identified as Rio C. Moncrief splashed a beverage on a PPB sergeant and two officers. At about 11:15 a.m., a handful of protesters pushed through the officers on the line and laid down on the parade route. The PPB officers and Multnomah County Sheriff's deputies moved in and arrested 8 people. During the arrest, the woman who splashed the PPB members then threw a can containing liquid at them. No PPB members were injured. Officers made an additional arrest of the woman who threw the beverage on the police, sergeant, and officers. We're waiting to see if the police were going to be supported by the district attorney and city hall, if they're going to get the backing they should get and haven't gotten in the past. But they were not empowered strongly enough to intervene faster when the first few infractions happened and stop the disruptions earlier. So this is a couple hours of disruption by a few dozen people of a parade being watched by thousands. And there was tolerance given to these people. That just shows you what you get for tolerating that stuff. Let me see. I did not post that one, so you should get a look at that. Good article in the Oregon Catalyst. Profoundly disappointed, a pride flag at the Newburgh Library was apparently targeted, they believe, in an act of vandalism. Every year, the Newburgh Public Library puts a pride flag for Pride Month in the window. 5 days into June, the flag was targeted with a BB gun. When we were teenagers, my age, targeting just about anything with a BB gun was fair game. In fact, sometimes, you targeted things you didn't want to target with BB guns. But if you saw like a squirrel, a tin can, a balloon, you would try to target it with a BB gun. But they've apparently found that someone extremely nefarious, who I don't believe the window could not be damaged by a BB gun. But the library staff said they hang the pride flag every year. And the city manager for Newburgh, Will Worthy, said, "I was angry. And I was also profoundly disappointed someone would do this, a BB gun." What if somebody threw a rock? That's about the same, actually, except the rock might actually break the window. The BB gun cannot. And as of Thursday evening, the suspect, a juvenile, has been arrested, according to Newburgh Dundee Police Department. The case is being referred to the Yamhill County Juvenile Department for prosecution. They're going to throw the book at this guy for shooting a BB gun at a window. They're not sure if the shooter was driving by the library or walking past when it targeted the flag. Sounds like they don't got a lot of good evidence. However, they're investigating the shooting as a possible bias crime. Authorities also collected surveillance footage from the library and surrounding businesses. So they're conducting a full investigation of this. While we have dozens of you-know-whats from Antifa disrupting a parade with thousands of people at it, and they are throwing the book at some kid with a BB gun. Yeah. And 3 years ago, the Newburgh School Board banned pride flags. Then in 2022, a person was captured on surveillance video burning a Newburgh resident's pride flag. um, we have had things that have gone on in the recent past that are negative, Newburgh Mayor Bill Rossiker said. But the people in Newburgh love people. And they're sure showing that by throwing the book at a juvenile with a BB gun. Our town, like all towns, needs to stand up for what is right. I hope that someone has to pay restitution for this. For a BB gun that did no damage? All right. Well, there you have it. By the way, there is a kind of a companion story to this, and I know I just saw this, and I honestly can't remember exactly where. I think it's probably somewhere on my computer desktop, but I believe I saw that in Washington State, there's a new, let me see if I can find this. They've implemented a new law. It was signed by the governor, and somebody apparently did some skid marks of the motorcycle on some sort of drawing on the ground, some mural that was painted or chalked on the ground. And they are arresting and charging with some kind of very serious crime. I don't know if it's a felony, to the person who did the skid marks on the pride display. And it's actually being done out of the belief that this is in fact a bias crime when somebody does skid marks across a pride display on the ground. But if you do that to an American flag, it's called free speech, and they sure love it. They in fact encourage it because they're just expressing themselves. And so we need to get some common sense and some sanity back here. Tell the kid he did something wrong, slap on the wrists, tell him you're not allowed to go and have a BB gun anymore. Okay. But should you be sending him to juvie hall, throwing the book at him for this? Come on. Really. If you want to make it a teachable moment, fine. But what kind of world are we living in now that condones the idea that some kid firing a BB gun at a pride flag, probably just for giggles? Like, they have no evidence that there was even malicious intent in this. None. And yet this is what they're going to do. So let's get things straight in this country. Let's get it back on track. And you just heard it all here, national, state, and local news, with a point of view that you can't get really anywhere else in Oregon, not streaming online. And anyway, I hope you guys are having a good day and a good summer so far. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow night on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Have a good